Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to ACF's Chef Table webinar series. Thank you for joining today's webinar on gingerbread house construction. For those unfamiliar with the American Culinary Federation, the ACF, we're the leading organization for culinary professionals, offering education, certification, competition, accreditation, and a community for chefs and food service leaders. If you're not yet a member, today's webinar is a great example of the resources we offer. Today, we'll be joining ACF chef Brian Peffley and ACF chef Robert Corral in this special holiday episode of the ACF Chef's Table webinar series as they present an overview on building with gingerbread. Feel free to ask questions using the Q&A function at any time. Let's get started by sharing where you're from and your favorite holiday cookie in the chat. I am JJ Vitale. I am the new acting executive director for the ACF, and I am really excited to be here with you. Let's meet our presenters. This presentation is being led by Chef Brian Peffley, CEPC, CCE, AAC, who has been teaching at Lebanon County Career and Technology Center for the past 30 years, where he's been teaching with Chef Robert Corral for the past 30 years as well as the culinary instructor. Chef Peffley's program was the first ACFEF secondary accredited baking and pastry program in the country. He worked on numerous committees for the ACF, has participated in the ACFEF Accrediting Commission for many years as the secondary committee chair and the Northeast Regional Secondary Educator. He has been a member of the ACF Apprenticeship Committee and currently serves on both ACF's Apprenticeship and Baking and Pastry Task Force. Chef Peffley is actively working with ACF partners like Nocti and Ruby to better the Federation. In his free time, he enjoys gardening, being outdoors with his wife and 3 sons, and his dog, Sugar. At this time, I will pass it over to the chefs. Take it away.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to all those teachers who brought their students along for today. We greatly appreciate you being here, and welcome everybody. We're hoping to go through this presentation with you. We're going to go start to finish, from templates all the way down to finished product. So to get started, our goal today is to show you show work, talk about the planning, talking about templates, talking about product use. We want to go into different demo techniques that we're going to show you. We're also going to show you how different styles and techniques can be applied to those houses. So I have with me Chef Robert Corral, who's our culinary arts instructor. And one of the things we're very proud about, we were the first high school baking and pastry program in the country to be accredited by the ACF in both culinary arts and pastry arts here in little old Lebanon, Pennsylvania. So we're very, very honored to be here and to be able to present to you. So Chef, let's go ahead and get started. Do it. Chef's going to go ahead and be my cameraman. He's also going to be my voice of reason, and he's going to be my voice from beyond the camera. So to go ahead and get started, we're going to come over here and we're going to talk specifically about coming up with a concept and an idea, and how do I come up with what I'm going to do. And the reason why we want to spend so much time on the concept and the idea is because we're going to put a lot of time and energy into this. So TikTok is great, shows things very quick, but in reality, when it comes to a gingerbread house, if you want to do a good one, you're going to talk about doing it for weeks, hours, and even months. So there are experts out there way beyond my skill level, but I enjoy doing it because I find it very therapeutic to work on one simple task at the same time. So some of the things that we want to do is you want to make sure that you allot time for this project. It is something that's going to take weeks, possibly months. Some of those classes that are out there, it might be on a monthly basis until you get it done. I know I came up with my concept all the way back in the fall. So where did I come up with my concept? I do a lot of internet searches. What I don't like to do is I don't like to plagiarize a house. I don't like to do a house that somebody else has done. So what I do is I go out, I love architecture, so I go and look at different styles of houses. For me, I gravitate toward Victorian homes. Victorian homes have those gables and those peaks and those turrets. And for me, I can translate that very easily into fondant, chocolate, and things like that. And you're going to see that because I went and did a Gothic manner that at the end of the presentation, I'm going to show you the finished product on that. So do some internet searches. So some of the concepts I come up with is I look at Victorian homes and I look at turrets and the peaks that I talked about. I look about different techniques, like here's brickwork. Here's a little bit of scalloped shingle work up at the top peak there. I look over here at maybe something like this. I see this wraparound porch, which I find is very interesting. I love the red and white color contrast. Color is very, very important when you do your house. So when I do a house, I focus on just the house. I'm not one who does a lot of sculptures or figurines and things like that. You certainly can do that. That is not my forte. That's not something I gravitate to. I had a very strong interest at when I was younger for Frank Lloyd Wright, so I gravitate towards that. I was very blessed to work at the Arizona Billboard, which is a Frank Lloyd Wright property. So if you want to get away from Victorian, you could do possibly a Tudor, or maybe something more whimsical, or something more like fairy in the fairyland aspect. Maybe mushrooms and tombstone, yeah, like a hobbit house. That's a great idea. And then the other thing that I have here is craftsman homes also translate really nice into gingerbread as well. One of the things for me personally is I see a lot of people trying to do mid-century modern. I love mid-century modern, but for me, it doesn't translate really attractively into a gingerbread because of the long spanning roof. And when you're looking at the gingerbread house, you don't normally look at straight on, you're looking at it possibly from a downward angle. So all you would see is roof. I'm not saying you can't do, a mid-century modern. I have seen people do like Falling Water, which is a mid-century modern type home. But the problem with that is you end up then getting a lot of roof and not a lot of other details. So find a good idea, find a good concept, try to find some good colors. And then from that idea, we got to go ahead and we have to turn this into what we call templates. Templates are no more than cardboard cutouts of the house that we're going to end up doing, but it has to be accurate. So when we're doing any type of a cardboard or template, I like using tape boxes, and I don't like to use corrugated cardboard. Corrugated cardboard crushes when you go to cut it, and it distorts when you go to cut gingerbread and things like that. So it's imperative that when you do your template, that your cardboard is exactly to what you want it to be. So when you go to roll it out, you want to keep the template and the cutout of gingerbread exactly the same. So this is the Gothic manor that I ended up doing. Just doing the Gothic manor itself, and this is just a part of it, how it's put together. This is only the main section of it. So this main section also has a front bump out, it has a tower, it has a porch that goes in the front here, it has a bump out the side. So there are other pieces, as you can see here. So total, there's probably about maybe 40 or 50 different little pieces that go to make this house. One of the other things you don't want to forget is, because as you can see, look how long this span is of this roof. It's quite a long span. So what you need to also do is to take into consideration support that's going to go inside this house. That's going to give you support. So I'm going to have one in here, and I'm going to have one in here. This will carry some of the weight of the roof that's being pushed on that, but it will also, if I wanted to put like a dormer, I can carry that weight down. So not only are we worrying about making it artistic and beautiful, but it has to be structurally sound as well. So when we're putting that together, we want to make sure that all those templates and those cardboard pieces all match and line up. So I cut the house out, and then I turn around and then I tape it all together and make sure that it all works from a cardboard standpoint, because then I know I can translate it and transfer it into gingerbread.
One chef, you also, if you notice, chef has everything labeled, and sometimes they'll be like, I need one piece, I need two pieces. It just depends on what you're looking at. And sometimes if it's something that's very intricate, you might wind up doing it twice just because of breakage.
That's right. When you're doing something fine and very fragile, you always want to have extras. I just almost threw away almost a complete house just because I had that many backup pieces, because I wanted to pick out the best piece to make sure that I put it into my house. So the next thing I want to talk to you about is if you're entering competition, and this is for any baking competition, to be honest. When I have students that want to enter competitions, whether it's through ACF or a local fair or a gingerbread house competition, one of the things that you really need to do is you need to make sure you read the rules. That goes for certification, that goes for any kind of competency exam. You always want to read the rules. So in competition, normally for gingerbread, they are going to expect you to only use edible product. So you're not allowed to use like styrofoam or hot glue gun or cardboard or anything in there that is not edible. So for my house, and when Chef and I make our houses, we make them completely edible. Now, that gives us the opportunity that if we wanted to compete, we could enter it in competition, but it also is showing the students that it is completely edible. One of the reasons when I do my house, I want to make sure that my house is going to last a long period of time. So I'm going to show you sugar, and I'm going to show you sugar windows, but in my house, I stay away from sugar windows because in our school, the temperature fluctuates so drastically that the windows would only last up to about a week. So people say about isomalt, you can use isomalt, but still the fluctuation, it would eventually melt its way out. So the reason what I use my house for here is to recruit. Right now we have tours going on, so the focus is specifically on recruitment. So I put my house out front in our pastry shop, and then it draws a lot of attention and a lot of interest. So that's the purpose why I do my house. So I'm not entering this year. So again, non-edible or edible. If you're going to compete, make sure you read the rules, make sure you're entering it accordingly. There are usually size regulations with that. So you want to make sure that if you are going to enter, also leave yourself plenty of time. So if you're looking at wanting to enter a contest, they're pretty much over for this season, but you want to go ahead and look at that for next year and start planning for that. So we talked about Victorian homes and things like that. We talked about templates, and we also talked about using the proper cardboard for that. So now let's go ahead and talk about gingerbread. What type of gingerbread do I use? So I have submitted for this webinar a recipe that we use. So one of the things that I noticed over the 30 years that I've been doing this recipe, the honey quality has gone in the toilet. It has really, really dropped down in quality. So people are supplementing rice. What did you say, Chef?
Rice syrup.
Rice syrup is being added in the honeys. It's basically corn syrup. So it's stretching out the honey. So what does that do to this recipe? Well, what it does is it never allows the gingerbread to get hard and snap. It stays pliable because of that corn syrup and not as much honey. So what I found was to do this recipe, I go out and get unfiltered or pure honey. I usually try to stay away from my food vendors. I try to go to a local food market and get something that's local and something that's fresh. One of the other things too is how you make this gingerbread is you take your sugar and your honey and your sweetex and you bring it to a boil. And it's really important that you really, really boil it up. And if you want to use a candy thermometer, you can, but you want to really boil it for at least 10 to 15 minutes. What you're doing is dissolving that sugar, but more importantly, you're bringing that up to that crack stage with that syrup. And then you take the dry ingredients, which is your flour, your ground ginger, your cinnamon, your baking powder, and then that's all put in the mixing bowl. The syrup that you make goes in the freezer, and that you can cool down very quickly, or you can make it the night before and let it sit out and then add it the next day with a paddle, and then you add some eggs and some water. I have, in the recipe that I provided, I have cut the baking powder in half. I noticed that by cutting it in half, I have a little less bubbles, but if you're going to use them for like Christmas ornaments or tree ornaments, I would leave the full amount in it so that they puff slightly, just a little bit. So when you're doing that, then you make the dough, you press it out onto a sheet pan, you cover it with a bag, and then I don't refrigerate it. Because I'm not eating this, I know it has egg in it, but I'm not eating it, and it stays pliable, and it lasts for almost 2 months without it spoiling or anything like that. Even though it has the egg in it, has so much sugar in it that it helps preserve it. And it stays quite pliable, and it's very easy to use, and you can sculpt with it, and I'll show you how to do that. So with that being said, we'll go on to the next thing. So if you have any questions on anything that I do, put it in the chat and we'll answer them at the end. So the next thing we're going to talk about is rolling out dough. Can emphasize the importance of consistency of how you roll the dough. Just like you have accuracy in your template, you want to have consistency in rolling out your dough. You want to make sure that your dough is the same consistency. If you're fortunate enough like me and I have a sheeter, which I didn't always have, it's only the last 8 years that I have a sheeter here. It makes it very, very easy to have consistency. But if you don't have a sheeter, just make sure that you go around using a ruler and make sure you measure and make sure you have the right consistency, the right thickness throughout the entire dough. And that's really important because it will bake uneven. You'll have some areas that are much more pliable and some areas that are crisp. So you want to keep that dough nice and flat and even. So the next thing I want to talk about is, should I bake on sill pads or should I bake on parchment paper? Well, I can show you very simply what's the difference. So if you bake on parchment and you are going to have your house open where it's going to be exposed to the inside, you're going to get this rippling effect. Okay, because what happens is the parchment is releasing air and it's going to create these ripples underneath there. So if you're not having your inside of your house exposed, that you're not going to see the inside, it doesn't matter then. But if you're going to have it exposed, you're going to end up with this nice smooth effect if it's on sill pad. One of the most important things, if you don't remember anything from this presentation, whenever you're baking gingerbread, always use flat sheet pans. So if you're like my school, you might have to go through them and pick through, because there's some that look like they went through a train wreck, and you just got to pick through them and find the best, flattest sheet pans. Set them on a table, make sure they don't rot, and those are the sheet pans you want to use. So accuracy in cutting, accuracy in template, accuracy, you're going to see a pattern here, because every time you keep keeping it close and accurate, your finished product is going to go up and up and up in view and in points when you go to compete. Okay, so that's how you're looking at it. So you can go dark or you can go a little lighter, but you're still getting hard. So with this dough, yeah, I know I can have stability. All right, so let's go into talking about cooling. So after we bake, what I like to do is, while they're still fairly hot, I like to flip them upside down. And what happens is, instead of them wrapping up and curling, they will flip over and they'll relax down. You can also, if you wanted to, put weight on it. So you could put another sheet pan on top of it and put a weight on top of that. I use my baker scale weights, and that will force some weight on it. What you're trying to do is prevent it from distorting from the original image that you started. So you want to make sure you don't just bake them, pull them out, and just walk away. You do want to try to flip them, and then I've noticed that they stay more consistent and they don't roll up on you. Okay, so going on to the next thing, what we want to do is we want to talk about when you cut the dough, when you roll it out and you're going to cut it. I prefer using a pizza wheel over a knife, because if you use a knife, you're going to pull the dough and it's going to slightly distort. If you use a pizza wheel and you go and cut, it's actually pinching the dough and it's less to distort. If you do want to use a knife, I recommend you using a very small point of a serrated, an X-Acto knife. That little point, if you use that as a scribe to cut, you will find that it won't pull the dough. So when you have the dough rolled out and you put your template and then you're tracing out that cookie cutter that you made, you want to make sure that you don't distort it. Another little tip that I learned is, instead of rolling the dough out and then cutting it and then picking it up and moving it onto your sheet pan, roll the dough out and roll it up on the sheet pan, roll it on to your sheet pan, cut it on the sheet pan, and remove the excess dough. So that way you're not moving or distorting that image in any way, shape, or form. It is paramount that you don't change the template and the dough. It's got to be the same. Okay. All right. So going on to the next thing, what you can do with gingerbread is really, you can add texture and different type of elements to the walls. So when we're looking at the walls, you can make a wood grain. And how I did this very simply, all I did was take a pizza cutter and roll back and forth, and it gives you this wood grain effect. Chef Coral uses this on his demonstration on his house. So when we get down to that, you'll see this technique being used down there. Another thing too is, you can get any type of rolling pin textured in any way, shape, or form. This one's grooved. You can get them in brick form. You can get any type of image that you want, and you can roll it on dough and you can get that effect. You can even take a fondant roller that you would use on fondant to do a lace on a cake, and you can translate that into dough as well. So let's say you're doing a whimsical house and you want this ivy or pretty flowery effect on it, you can get that effect on the dough and you can see that it bakes off. All right, so that's showing you different techniques with that. So going on to the next thing, I want to show you what I did for my house and how I put it together. So very simply, let me look here at my cornet here. So this one here is a technique called flooding. So if pastry students that are on the line, you know, flooding comes, you know, with cookies. Culinary students, you may do the same thing. This gives you the effect of brick where plaster has broken away. And then I can go ahead and take some chocolate and I can come in here with my cornet and maybe I just do a little cracking effect and just make it look like it's breaking. So if I'm doing some type of a stucco home and I want to give this brick effect, maybe I did a Western saloon and the back side of the wall kind of broke off. It gives that kind of effect. Whenever you're decorating or doing walls, you want to make sure you do them all down. You want gravity to be your friend. You want to work with gravity because if you stand your house up and then you try to decorate, gravity is going to be constantly pulling everything off your house. So I always decorate all my walls down. And I learned this from watching YouTube and watching people doing houses because I always put my house together and then started trying to attach things and things would be constantly falling off. So work with gravity, decorate all your walls laying down. So one of the techniques that I do here is I just used an edible marker and drew a line here because I just wanted to find out this is going to be my base. So I'm just going to go ahead, pipe in here. I have pre-rolled some fondant that I have dried. I'm going to use that as a baseline. So my Victorian home always has a stone foundation. So what I did was I went ahead and I took black, gray, and white, and I just marbled the fondant. And then all I do is I just pick and I pull and I shape with my hands. And notice I don't have gloves on because this is not going to be eaten. This is all for competition, so I don't have to worry about wearing gloves. All right, so this is not for that. But then by just shaping them, I can get these pretty little stones. Now, one of the things that I want to mention to students specifically is you want to keep things in scale to your house. Now, if this stone is a little bit larger than what I need, so I made these smaller stones. So to go ahead in there, I would just go ahead and just pipe a little bit of icing down. And then I'm just going to go ahead and take a little offset spatula and just smear this out. Just spread that out. And then I just come in here and then I just attach stones. And I do that all the way across. And we're going to talk about that in more detail, but that's the technique I used. Why did I put a burgundy band? Because my next siding I'm going to come in here is I'm going to go in and attach the gray siding. And that little pop of color you're going to see in my house adds a little bit of an accent to that. And if you notice these colors, these grays and burgundies are very, very Victorian. And then I use green as an accent. So we would just go ahead. And when I attach any colored fondant, I always make sure that the color of the fondant is the color of my icing. And the reason why is when I attach these, I want to make sure that if icing does peek through, it's not glaring like white. It's the color of the siding that it is. So it blends in. So if I do have a little bit of icing peeking through, your eye doesn't draw to it. It blends in very, very easily. So that's a kind of technique. So I don't want to give away too much because I want you to see the finished product. So going on from that, we did our walls. I just want to make sure I covered everything that I wanted to cover on walls. Yes, let's talk about windows. There are many, many different ways and different techniques that you can use for windows. One of the ones that you know, I'm sure of, taking hard candy, crushing it up, it gives you this beautiful stained glass effect. All right, so that's what it looks like on the backside. Again, smooth. All right, you can accent this if you're going to have it exposed, but on the inside here, you can come in here with a cornet and you can go ahead and decorate and you can do scroll work and things like that. Any type of accents, any type of beadwork that you're going to do in here, you can finish this all out and do any type of little beadwork and accent that. One of the other things you can do is you can use the cutouts from the window. You can use them as shutters as well and then accent them as well. I'm a more of a traditionalist. I don't use candy as decoration, not that I'm opposed to that, but I would rather make things myself than actually use somebody's bought candy. All right, so all I did was I took the hard candy. You can use Jolly Ranchers. I had Lifesavers. This is what I got my hands on. One of the things you can do, if you use sugar-free candy, you will find that that is isomalt. Okay, so sugar-free candy is isomalt. So if you're not familiar with isomalt, it's a sugar substitute. A lot of people that do sugar work and showpieces, they use isomalt. You can use isomalt. Use it the same way you would sugar. You melt it down on a pot to a certain temperature, and then you pour it and use it. When you go ahead, this is done raw dough, and then you sprinkle this in, and then it's baked together. So the dough and the sugar are baked at one time all together. This one I took sugar, I poured it, and I didn't crystallize it. What I did was I sprinkled sugar on it to give you a frosted glass effect. Again, I don't want people to see inside because I don't decorate the insides of my house. Now, if you wanted to decorate the inside of your house, then I would leave it plain and let the light shine through and you can see inside that. So that's another technique which you're familiar with. How this is done though is you bake the dough first and then on a sill pad, and you do want to use a sill pad with poured sugar because if you use parchment, it does stick and it's almost impossible to get it off if it doesn't peel off. So with sill pads, you just peel it off and you're ready to rock and roll. And then you can decorate it how you want. So how I do mine, because again, I talked about, I want them to last. And so how do I stay away from sugar because it melts and I'm going to put all these 2-3 weeks of time into this house. How do I go ahead and make it even last that length of time? So what I do is I cut out fondant. Now fondant, when you roll it out and you let it sit for a day or two, it will get hard. So it gets pretty pliable, okay, that I can break it and use it. So what I do is, again, take my cornet and all I'm gonna do, let's talk about a cornet. I'll stop here and I'll talk about a cornet. I try to stay away from pastry bags, okay? So if you use a pastry bag, I only use a pastry bag when I'm assembling and putting the house up. And the reason why is if you've done and used raw icing with a pastry bag, you put the icing in, you go ahead and you pipe it. Well, it starts drying at the top here. And then before you know it, all this icing is flaking all over the place and you have one heck of a mess. And if you're doing this at home, mom's not happy. So you want to make sure I stay away from bags for decorating with the house. And I go with cornets. For those that don't know what a cornet is, for those that do, I apologize, but it's just no more than parchment paper that's been cut into a triangle. And all you do is you take it from the center, you fold it up and you roll it into a cone. And you just roll this up nice and tight. And all I'm making is little disposable pastry bags. And what's nice about this is when I take it, I then take the seam, I fold it in half after I put some icing in it. Don't overfill it. And then I fold it over and I fold it over. And then I want to fold away from the seam. So if I fold towards the seam, it unravels. So I fold away from the seam until it's nice and tight. All right. And if I did it correctly, no icing will come out at the top. And I take scissors and cut it. And then I end up with the cornet that looks like this. Why I like these is because when I'm done with it, I just throw them away and get another cornet. I don't have a lot of mess. There's no flakiness from the bag. So that's one of the ways you can keep clean. I'm meticulous about when I'm working. I like to keep organized. I like to keep my station clean. That's a good habit when you want to be in the industry, when you're working in general. So I'm going to go ahead and, like I said, raw icing is my glue. We're going to talk a little bit more about raw icing. And I'm just going to go ahead and type this out. All right, and this is going to be going in the backside. This one's a little smaller. Get a bigger one here, right? And then you just flip this over, and it looks like that. Then what I have done here is I made little candles. How I made these? I rolled little stems of white fondant, and you can color this if you wanted a different color. And then I took red, yellow, and orange, and I marbled it, and I pulled it with my fingers to make these little flames. Then I took a little raw icing, and if you look really close there, I made a little bit of drippage of the wax running down the candle. Those I would then attach inside here. Again, it's white, so I'm going to use white. If the candles were a different color, I would make the icing the same color. So then I attach them like that. Now, what I like using, for those that don't know, there's a product called gelatin sheets. If you're in pastry, you know what this is because we deal with this a lot. But this looks like glass. It is edible, so you can use this in competition. And what I do is I cut it and then use this. Now, the downside is you don't want it to get wet. So it's literally free hanging inside here. You'll cut it to make it fit. And then I have here, my accent color is green. So I would do, if I was doing this wall, I would do my siding, and then I would do, just like framing, just like carpentry, I would then frame in using my green accents, okay? And then I would have my burgundy line here and my stone wall. So that's how you would get your effect. So imagine a stone wall, the burgundy line, the gray siding, and then the green trim. So if you can keep that in your memory, you'll see that in the final product when we get done here. Again, when you cut the window out, you can save these pieces, and these could be used as shingles. I mean, shutters if you wanted to. So that gives you another example of that. So I showed you so far, we showed you how to do run out with icing, showed you how to do royal icing with fondant and do siding, showed you how to do candy and fillings and stuff like that. We also showed you how to do poured sugar, and you can crystallize it, or you can use some sugar on it to give it that frosted effect. Another technique here is doing fondant and then doing the gelatin sheet over top of it and framing it with that.
Chef, one thing.
Oh, yes, let's talk about this.
Your propane.
Yeah, so when you're using sugar, one of the tips that you, for those that don't know, if you have bubbles and you're trying to get rid of the bubbles, when you pour it in there, you take the torch and you just gently go over with the torch, and all those bubbles will release out of that sugar before it sets up. So you pour the sugar, and if it bubbles up, let it sit for about a minute, and then lightly go over it with the torch, not burning your gingerbread, but just over the sugar, and all those bubbles will pop. Thank you, Susan Notter, for that little tip that she taught me about. So going on to the next thing, I want to talk about the roof. Since we talked about the walls and we talked about the windows, now let's talk about the roof. Again, one of the things that you want to make sure is you want to make sure that you keep things in scale. So one of the things you need to see is, like, on my turret and my tower roof, these are the size of the shingles. Just to do the tower roof, when we get to that, took me 4 hours, just the roof on the tower. And the roof is only about this wide, and it's about that tall. All right, this is the size of shingles that I use underneath the peak, and you'll see them when we get to that. And then the roof. One of the things that I want to talk about is, students, when you do a roof and you're trying to match what construction does, and you do your first run like this, the next run does not go on top of it like this. What you need to do is you need to cut a run in half and stagger the joints. So when you're laying out your roofs, all the joints should be staggered. So that way you get a more realistic look for the roof. Also, you want to make sure that the size of your shingles are consistent. These are specifically 2 different roofs here. This is one roof, this is a different roof. This is for a smaller roof, this is for a bigger roof. So you want to try to make sure that you're keeping in scale to perspective of what you're doing. That's very, very important. So when you're doing it, you want to keep things in scale, because if the shingles are too big or too heavy, they don't look right. They don't look right to scale. Also, if you notice, all of the fondant that I use here is really, really thin. When I go to do shingles and I go to do any type of insert, everything, the siding, if I didn't have this siding that wouldn't be thin, what would happen if it was thick? It would start backing up on top of itself. And by the time I get to the top, the siding would be almost sticking straight out. So you want to make sure that the siding is very, very, very thin.
That gives you a nice refinement look.
It does.
It gets too chunky.
It does. It looks too heavy. And remember, if you're spanning this roof and you're putting all that fondant on that roof, and you don't have support, she will collapse over time. All right. So if you're trying to do a curve, one of the things with this recipe, it does bend, but you have to put it on something. So PVC pipe, at our school, I just go down to the plumbing instructor and just ask him for some pieces. All right. And that's what I end up using. So you can bend gingerbread and get any type of shape that you want. One of the things that I also wanted to point out, Rice Krispie treats I used. I didn't use on this piece, but I have in the past. So something as simple as taking a funnel, and you can get a nice, really pretty dome effect. And then what I would do is I would ice this, and then I would pull it so that it was smooth, let it sit, and then I would build my shingles on that. And this is the size shingle that I would use on a roof like that. So yes, it would start and you work your way around and you just keep building and building and building till you get to the top. And you'll see that when I get to the tower. So I have this here because I want to discourage you from using bought Rice Krispie treats. And the reason why is a lot of junk in these things. There's a lot of preservatives and there's a lot of stuff called BHT, which adds in freshness, which what that means is it doesn't stale. So if I know they make Rice Krispie sheets, that's great, but it's the same recipe as this. I discourage you from doing that because make your own Rice Krispie treats, because what you can do is you can ease out some of the butter and you can add in more marshmallow or less marshmallow, and you can cook the marshmallow harder, and then you end up with a brick like I have here. And this I made this morning. This hasn't been sitting around. So I make my own Rice Krispie treats because then I know it's going to be hard and firm and it's not going to be soft or get soft. So you can use funnels to give you that turret effect as well. And then down here, you can also, let's say you're doing a barn and you want to do a silo. So this is how you get that roundness. It's almost impossible to take gingerbread and roll it completely round. So what you want to do is go ahead and use Rice Krispie treats, and you can pack it into a pipe. You just want to make sure you grease this really well, and then you'll be able to slide that out and you'll get that really neat effect. But again, stay away from this. Is for you to eat, munch on the long way. But if you're going to use it for competition, I would definitely make your own because, like I said, super hard, and that's what you want. You want it to stay firm. I have these here again to reiterate: size of shingle in proportion to the tower or to whatever you're doing, keeping that in scale. So now this mess here I have here, because in gingerbread, there is a lot of what we call gingerbread work. And that's all that filigree work that you see. I do this on acetate sheets, and all I do is I will sketch out, and you will see this railing on my house that I have prepared, right? And how this is done is very simply, again, using my cornet, all I did was, these are basement grates that I have created, and that's this image here. I just sketched it out. If you're not good at drawing, go to clip art. You can use clip art, and you can go ahead and pull something, and then just make it shorter or bigger, depending upon what you're using it for. These are little brackets that I put up in the porch that add a little bit of accent. I love using chocolate because it works really, really well. And then you can do a piping work that looks something like this, that you can see up here at the peak that I did up here, and that you'll see on the house. Let me get to that. But then all I did, acetate sheet, the drawing, you slide it underneath the acetate sheet, and then you just go ahead and you just trace. So then it's just like tracing. Now, what I will end up doing is I will end up doing this like 4 or 5 times. So as I'm piping, I would go ahead, and this is just my own interpretation of drawing a little accent, and I just go ahead and just draw and pipe. And then you just go ahead and keep going and add those accents, and you just keep building and building and building, and you'll see how those are done. Okay, so that's how that's done. I use chocolate melts just because of convenience. You certainly can use tempered chocolate. Big thing with chocolate, making sure that you melt it just to melt it, not cook it. I just got done scolding students this morning, boiling chocolate on the stove. Want to make sure my best tip I can tell you is bring a pot to a simmer, turn it off, move it off the stove, and then put your chocolate on that, and then go about what you're doing. And then by the time you come back to it, stirring it periodically, it's at the perfect temperature to go ahead and pipe. All right, so I want to talk about icings, because a lot of times students make raw icing. My recipe is really simple: 7 pounds of panic sugar, 2 cups of panic, two cups of whites. And you can use some cream of tartar. Cream of tartar is a drying agent. I find that I don't need to do that. But it's really important that you use the right consistency. So if I am going to assemble or build a house, I want to make sure. So let's talk about what I have here. So when you're using raw icing, you got to make sure that the raw icing is constantly covered. So how I always store my raw icing is I put saran wrap on it, nice and tight. Then I take a paper towel that's damp, and I put that in on top, and then I put a lid on top of that. And that's how I can keep my icing without getting a crust or a shell on it. If you do get a crust on it, or you forgot and you left it out, you can put some hot tap water on it. Let it sit for about 5 minutes. Pour that water off and then stir it. It'll break that shell and dissolve that shell. So you don't have to throw it away because it does get expensive. But firm icing, all right, let me get my spoon here. So this is firm. This is what I would use. Now this has been sitting. I would re-agitate this so it's smooth. But this is the type of thickness that I would use to build the house, to assemble the walls that are decorated and to glue this together. All right. Now, if I'm going to go ahead and do some flooding, and what I mean by that is I would take a semi-stiff that looks like this. This is my semi-soft. So it's really important that you understand consistencies of ices. That goes for decorating too when you're doing a cake. So this is the stiff, right? You can see that. Then this is the semi-soft. You can see what that looks like. All right, so that's semi-soft. So this I would use for what we call damming. So if we want to walk all the way back here to this wall, so this semi-soft I would do around the outside. All right, this is what I would use to do the outside, so it won't run. And then I would use what I call soft or flooding to go ahead and flood. Now realize whenever you add icing or colors to this, it's going to change that, right? Then I also have here, just to show you other things that you can use. There are bronze colors and golds and accents and things like that. Again, depending upon where you go, some will not allow this in competition. Some will not allow edible markers, but always have a nice supply of fondant tools. So now the time has come, and we're going to show you some of the work that Chef and I have done. So this is Chef Coral's outhouse, and as you can see, the wood grain effect that you see going on here. He has little cardinals that are made out of fondant, a very rustic. It's three-dimensional, but two-dimensional trees. So this gives you a different look of how you can put together. We didn't talk about trees because I personally, I don't do them because when we get to my house, you'll see it. There's not enough room for that. But you can see he used the stones in here, and that's all done in fondant. This is 100% nothing but gingerbread, royal icing with a little bit of fondant accents. All right, Chef?
That's it.
And the wreath is fondant as well on the front there. And that's just a circle of fondant, and then you took a scissors and snip at it.
Snip at it, and then put some other little berries in there. It doesn't take very long. But again, you're looking at the textures, and that's really why this works for this style of gingerbread, that you got these textures in here, but especially in the tree and the baking. And the baking times are also give you color contrast when you're doing something like this. And when we go over here and look at chefs, you're not have to worry about it. You want to bake everything. You want to bake it that it's going to be firm and it's not very pliable. But the gingerbread recipe we have is excellent. I mean, we got probably about 20 years ago.
At least, yes.
Yeah. So yeah.
So now we're going to go ahead here to the house that I did. My inspiration, where I came from, is Wednesday. The TV show Wednesday is a dark comedy, and it's gothic, and I see a trend going in that direction. So this is not a Christmas house, it's a winter house. So that's what I went with. So you don't see any wreaths or anything like that. But notice the colors. It is a dark, I used black for the roof and the shingles, gray. Here's that burgundy band that we talked about with the stones. Here's the chocolate with the inset of that glittery gold to give the illusion of light. There is the trimming. I used a little bit of fleur-de-lis, kind of looks like a cross kind of symbolism. Then up here is that piping work that I did. If you look up across the top, here is all chocolate, royal icing. This is that 4-hour roof that I talked about. That's that, and then more railing around that. And as you come around, this tower is those stones that we talked about. So I carried the stones from here up through. There's the roof. If you look up and you look down, there's the groove using a pizza wheel. You come around to the other side here, you'll see this wall, another filigree work up here, and how icicles are done. And before I get done here, just taking a semi-soft and just piping and coming down and let gravity pull. So you can make them as long as you want. Just let them pull, because I have a lot of students like, how do you do the icicle? That's all it is. So if you aren't getting the length you want, you can tighten this up and make it a little longer to get these longer effects. Again, using the brown, the fondant on the corner here. Again, it's decorated all the way around. Here's the dormers that I was talking about. That's why I needed those superstructures that are in here that are holding up underneath that so that this doesn't fall in. Then over on this side, I have another bump out on that side, and Chef will catch that on the other side. So, alrighty, I'm ready for some questions. Any of my friends out there have any questions for me? Anybody out there?
Hey, we're coming back.
Oh,
So let's see. I'm looking for you guys to stick some questions in the Q&A. And until then, I'm going to get started because there's something that I know you and I are both very excited about, and that is the Baking and Pastry Task Force. So, Chef Peffley, can you talk a little bit to Baking and Pastry Task Force? Why ACF wanted one, need one, and what you guys are working on?
absolutely. So I'm very honored. I'm with a wonderful group of people. Hopefully some of them are on the line here with us. And I am very honored to be a part of the group. I'm representing secondary education on the task force. So my approach is making sure that we're reaching out to all of our members, top and bottom. So we want to get everybody who is just new to our industry or thinking about our industry and want to make sure that they're included. One of the reasons why the task force was formed, Melissa Trimmer, who's our chairperson, she was approached about, they want more pastries. So she's our chairperson and gathered us together. And we have been really working and focusing on how we can add more. If you saw the National Culinary Review, pastry took force on that one this month. So we're very excited to see a more push towards pastry because I know there's a lot of coffee shops out there that need a lot of pastries, and there's a lot of more interest in pastry arts. So we want to make sure that we're embracing and covering everything that is needed for that part of the hospitality industry.
Yeah, great. And I have to say, one of my favorite sessions at National Convention this year was the baking and pastry kind of task force panel session where we really went across the spectrum, spoke to different careers, and it was nice to see everyone from students to experienced chefs in that audience. That was a packed room you guys
Yeah.
had.
From a certified master pastry chef to a chocolatier in Las Vegas to independent bakery owner in Pittsburgh to a corporate pastry chef from Dawn Foods. Was very honored to be the mediator for that. I felt very honored to be a part of that great experience.
Yeah. Well, great. Okay, so we have a couple of gingerbread questions, and it looks like some more are going to come in. So let's go back to the most challenging part of a gingerbread build. What is that? Let's break it down one last time. Most challenging part.
For me, is allocating the time.
Okay.
All right. For you, if you have never done one before, I would start simple so you can get successes. Even if they're small successes, they're successes. Sometimes you bite off too much and it's failure, and then you're discouraged and you walk away. I would rather you, even if it's just a basic kit, and you do the kit and then maybe you add a little personal to it so that you understand the structure of that and then go from there. Wins are wins in increments. They're not huge leaps. It takes time to get to that level. And I stay in my wheelhouse. All right. I know what I can do. I know my skill level. After doing this for over 40 years, this is what I do, and this is where I feel comfortable. And I know what will be successful and what isn't. So this is kind of my style of how I do it. It's no different than a painter and a sculptor. If you look at some of the masters that are out there, like Andy and Susan Otter, they have a style about them that when they do their work, you can definitely see that work coming through.
Awesome. And one of the big parts you talked about for being successful was the planning. So let's do it one more time. What's the one step of planning you never skip?
Yes, one of the things that I first allocate the time, do the research, definitely find things that inspire you. And then just to let you know, this house is actually 6 houses merged together. I saw the tower in one house. I saw this bump out in another. I saw this projection was another one, and I merged it all together to make it my own. So that's what I would really encourage you. Find something that inspires you, because you're going to be putting a lot of time and energy into it. And even though I was here the entire Thanksgiving break doing this, really enjoyed doing it, because it was something that I designed and I knew it would have an appreciation. I have not posted this on social media, so I'm going to, after this webinar, it's going to be blasted. So
Tag all of us.
so and hopefully you'll see the progression of the pictures as I'm talking. I sent to ACF from start to finish, so you will see the construction of the house, even where I draw lines on the roof to keep the shingles straight. No different than when a roofer is chalking a line and stretching that line to keep the shingles straight. Same principles in there. So architecture and carpentry, masonry, all come into play into this. So those are all things that I would encourage you to lean into if that's what you really want to do, and do something like this.
Okay, so I think we are ready. I don't see any more questions coming in now. So let's see. Oh, hang on. Oh, I do. I see them now. Okay. Have you ever built a gluten-free gingerbread house?
I have not. I don't think I have not experimented. I would have to create the recipe of gingerbread first. I don't find that a problem, because my houses are not edible. While they are edible, they're not made to be eaten. So
Right on.
great
Okay.
up.
Okay. Let's see. How thick do you roll your gingerbread?
I go with 1/4 to 1/8 of an inch when I roll. I try to keep it not too thick, not too thin. It's a little less than a pie dough when you're doing
Perfect.
pie.
Would it be better to use a 50-50 mix of fondant and gum paste instead of using fondant on its own?
Whichever you're using, the 50-50 is more for figurines and things like that for me personally, and that's one of the areas that I don't go into. But you certainly can. I would play around with it. I like straight up fondant, because I usually just I roll it out, cut it, and let it dry, and then I apply it as I need it. I noticed too that if I don't let it totally dry, reason why you don't use fondant right away, because when you go to attach it, it will misshapen, so it makes the the siding not so crisp. So you want to make sure that it's semi-firm, but you want it soft enough that I take my scissors to trim the ends. And if it becomes too dry, it's too brittle. So maybe the gum paste additive would help with that. I'd have to try that next time.
What do you suggest for smoke from a chimney?
I would use spun sugar.
Okay. What do
Yeah.
you suggest for snow on the ground?
Oh, that's one thing I didn't talk about. Thank you very much. So instead of using a shaker, when you shake this out, it becomes very thick. All right. What I like to use, I use cheesecloth, and I wrap it around, and then I end up with much finer snow. So this is just like a little powder puff. All right. And then when it gets empty, I just untie the butcher twine, put more sugar in it, and I can use it as a little puff, and that will then cascade the snow more evenly. And that's how you get this wispy effect. All right. Instead of the shaker. Okay. And you can get a cheesecloth in the grocery store. It's in the specialty side. All right.
Okay.
Great question.
Do you use CMC with the fondant for making your shapes?
I do not.
Okay.
And I have not used a 3D printer. We do have a CNC program here that has made me cookie cutters. I had our welding department that made me larger cutters made out of metal to make our houses that we use for here in our class competition that we do.
Cool. How
It's
many
nice.
hours do you allow your students to complete their gingerbread house projects?
Say that again, JJ.
How many hours do you allow your students to complete their gingerbread house projects?
Yeah, we are a full day senior only program. So we have them for 6 hours and we give them 4 days. So that's 24 hours, but we they all do the exact same house. So remember I talked about small victories? So we don't have them spending a lot of time on finding the creation, because we also have other things that we have to get through in our program. So we want them to focus on the decoration of the house. So while they're all the same style, they all look completely different because they all put their personality on the outside of it. So we can do ours 24 hours over a 4-day period. All right, but I do know that there's friendly consumer science programs out there that take an entire month and only have a period. So, you know, you just have to find the space to be able to store these and be able to work on them.
Awesome. How do you roll out the sheet pan?
Okay, so rolling the dough out onto the sheet pan, what I do is just like pie dough. I would roll it out and then I roll it up on my pin, my rolling pin, and then I would roll it back over onto my sheet pan. Again, making sure that the sheet pan is flat, making sure I have my sill pan down. And when I go ahead and cut, I want to be very careful because I don't want to put cuts into my silicone pad. Okay.
All right, and it looks like we have one more before we're going to do your pictures at the end, I believe.
Okay.
So is powdered sugar sifted before you place it in the cheesecloth? Back to our snow question.
Do not, because the cheesecloth actually does sift it as it comes through.
Okay, so I think we're going to be looking at some of the pictures.
Excellent.
Excellent.
Well, I want to thank everybody who attended today. I greatly appreciate the opportunity for Chef Coral and myself to be here with you. I hope you all have a happy holiday. We really enjoyed this opportunity to present to you, and we're hoping, thank goodness to our IT person that's behind the camera here, Adam Parton, for hooking us up with excellent IT.
Yes. Thank you guys. And seriously, thank you, chefs, for bringing us this presentation. We appreciate you taking the time to share your insights and your knowledge on gingerbread. For all of our attendees, please be on the lookout for a post-webinar email you'll receive in the next day or two, which will include the recording, a survey link to earn your continuing education hour, upcoming webinars, and additional resources. Maybe we'll get these pictures added in there too. If you don't want to wait to take your CEH survey, you should be able to stick around at the end of this webinar and be directed to it immediately. We hope you'll join us on January 21st as ACF chefs Michael Thrash and Rocco Paradiso kick off the first ACF Chefs webinar of the new year with an introduction to ACF's 2026 Trends Report. Then on February 11th, Chef Grant Tipton from the Polish Center of Wisconsin will be doing a demo on Polish potato cheese pierogi. Visit the media tab on acfchefs.org to register for upcoming webinars. On behalf of ACF National Office, thank you to our presenters for bringing us this opportunity, and thank you for joining us today. Have a great day, guys.
Bye, everybody.
All right.